ばあちゃんもひいおばあちゃんもみんな94歳とか97歳とか長生き家系なんですね。だからまだまだ私うん十年これからあるんですけど、仲間が集まってみんなで暮らしていこうっていうグループもいるので、はい、なのでそういう人たちと生きていけばいいかなって思うし。
When Junko Yamada ended her marriage more than 3 decades ago, being divorced was frowned upon in Japanese society. The 60-year-old dance instructor was briefly married when she was in her 20s, but the marriage didn't work out.
彼は実は映画監督志望のシナリオライターだったんですけど、でも他にアルバイトをしていて、で私はその頃新しくダンスのグループを作り、なんか着々とこう上がっていったというか、そんな風にできていったんですけど、相手があまりこう進歩がないって言ったらあれなんですけど。
She decided to go her own way and has stayed single since then.
自由が大好きっていうそういう感じなので、やっぱりちょっとね、どなたかいいパートナーが見つかればいいなとは思ってるんですけど、まあ自由でいたいっていうところが一番基本です。
Through her dancing and singing, Miss Junko expresses her thoughts on the state of being single.
60過ぎてからシングルになったので、最初はちょっと落ち込んでた時期があったんですけど、最近純子さんと知り合ってシングルでも全く関係なく元気で明るくて、でしょっちゅう連絡もくれるし、もう何も怖いものはないなっていうふうに思うようになりました、おかげで。
In Japan, an average household had 4 members in the 1980s. As of 2020, 38% are single-member households, but the pace of households shrinking to solo is rising fast. It's likely to exceed 40% of all households very soon. Some of the reasons: elderly residents losing their spouses. The Japanese are delaying their marriage or not marrying at all. 44-year-old Keisuke Asami hails from the Japanese port city of Kobe. He lived with his parents until he turned 25. It was at that time his company assigned him to work in China. He's been living alone since, and he's enjoying it. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Keisuke traveled all across Japan on his own, covering all 47 prefectures. During one of his first post-COVID-19 trips overseas, he drove a total of 4,000 kilometers alone. 自分の時間はどれだけ大切ですか？
自分の時間はどれだけ大切ってめっちゃ大事ですよね。ずっとこれでね、このペースでやってきたので、なかなかこう変えるのがちょっと難しくなってきてるかもしれないですね。
親から早く結婚しろとか言われたりしないんですか
？40ちょいぐらいまでは、結構親の方からも実家に帰るたびにもうどうなんやと、いつ結婚するんやみたいなことを言われてましたけど、最近ちょっと親も諦めたのか、僕別に諦めてないんですけど、家庭を持つとかこう子供を育てるとかはちょっとやってみたいなとは思いますよね。
According to a national survey in 1970, only 3.3% of women spent their lifetime single. By 2020, this figure has risen to 17.8%. As for men, 1.7% were lifetime bachelors. The ratio has increased to nearly 30%. Singles have grown into a big market that businesses cannot ignore. This is a yakiniku or barbecue chain. Traditionally, Japanese enjoy yakiniku with their close peers. These days, some restaurants find that it's more profitable to focus on solo diners. Since 2019, this yakiniku chain began offering what's known as a solo grill. Here's how it works. You order. In a matter of 3 minutes, your grill set is ready. You pick it up, and cook your meal. The good thing about eating in this style is that you don't feel self-conscious about being alone and enjoying yakiniku. In the past, you would hardly spot women eating alone at these joints. But according to this chain, 30% of their solo diners are women.
今回のコロナというところで、そこの部分はもちろん想像はできていなかったので、そこで一つ加速をしたっていうところで個食のニーズが高まったんではないかということは考えております。今お客様の 80% が今お一人様で来ていただいているお客様になります。
Management said the table turnover rate is better with more solo customers. Solo diners stay an average of 25 minutes, while a group could spend up to 2 hours. Hiroyuki Hayashi authored a research report on Japan's rising solo economy in 2021. He said while tapping into the solo market may help some businesses, in the long run, the shrinking household size will be bad for the Japanese economy.
世帯ベースで売っていたものを個人単位で売っていくこと、そこにちょっと注力しなきゃいけないということになりますので、企業としても今までのやり方が通用しなくなってくるというものがちょっとデメリットとしてあるのかなというふうに思います。あとは子供がいらっしゃらなくなるということは祖父母から孫がいなくなるということになりますので、昔は祖父母が孫のためにお金を使うといった結構大盤振る舞いにお金を使うといったこともあると思うのですけど、そういったシーンが少なくなってくるんですよね。
Mr. Hayashi says spending by grandparents played an important part in supporting Japan's consumption, which makes up about 60% of the nation's GDP. But if solo living households rise at this pace, such hefty consumption may not repeat. In South Korea, the rise of the single-person household is also bringing sweeping changes to many sectors. One of them is the funeral industry.
결혼할 생각은 없다는 그런 생각을 가지고 있습니다. 제가 죽으면은 아마 동생한테 이제 말해서 나는 만약에 그냥 상골이나 그런 산 분장 같은 걸 해달라고 하고 해서
봐줘야 돼?
Dressed in a traditional Korean hemp robe, Shim Jae-hyun is being lifted into a casket. The 24-year-old student is not dead. As a mortuary science major at Ulchi University in Seongnam, he's just experiencing the burial process as part of his course of study.
여기에 이제 들어오게 되면서 죽음을 마냥 이제 막 다들 막 장사 시설을 막 옛날에는 혐오 시설로 막 인식을 하였는데 이젠 그런 혐오 시설이 아닌 이제 약간 새로운 관점으로 긍정적인 시점으로 이제 바라보게 되었습니다.
And he's also given some thoughts on how he wants to be buried when he dies, especially since he has no plans to marry and raise a family.
아, 그럼 내가 죽어도 그럼 다른 사람에게 폐 안 끼치고 그냥 뭐 돈 안 들이고 그냥 혼자 갈 수 있겠구나라는 생각 때문에 그래서 그렇게 되었습니다.
Jae-hyun is not alone in wanting to embrace single life and eventually a simple burial. Statistics in 2021 shows the ratio of single-person households in South Korea rose to an all-time high of slightly above 33%. It's forecast that by 2050, 4 out of every 10 households will consist of just one member.
South Korea has the world's lowest birth rate, and slightly more than 30% of its 52 million population are single. And that's unlikely to change, as many in their 20s, 30s, and 40s have said they have no plans to tie the knot or have children. And so when they die, many are expected to be alone, raising questions about who'll take care of their funeral sites. And that is changing many of the traditions here in South Korea today.
In the last few decades, cremations have become very popular as they are simpler to take care of than graves, with many cemeteries usually being far away from central Seoul. That has given rise to different, even unconventional kinds of columbarium services. Like this facility, its appeals lie in the homey design. Ashes are kept here, together with a book where personal belongings, letters can be kept. Hwang Kwang-ho, who runs this place, says many of the spaces have been taken up by people planning for their own death.
쓰시고 이렇게 두시고 미리미리 오셔서 자기가 돌아가셔도 있을 자리, 장지를 미리 선택하신 분들이 많이 계세요. 그래서 자녀들한테 그런 부담을 주기 싫은 거죠. 예전에는 자식들이 그런 부담을 다 가지고 있다 보면은 지금 요즘은 자기가 죽어서 있을 자리도 직접 모시는 준비하는 그런 문화가 바뀌었어요.
The cost of keeping an urn here varies from a one-time 5 million won to 10 million won, about $3,800 to $7,600. As the number of people living alone continues to rise, the concept of natural burials is gaining traction. 66-year-old Kim Ye-sun has been coming to this memorial facility about 14 kilometers north of Seoul once every week to see her son, who died in 2016. Then, she wasn't completely sure if burying his ashes at this natural burial site was proper. But now she's confident she made the right choice.
근데 저는 이런 자연장이 뭔지도 모르고 왔어요. 와서 보니까 기가 막히더라고요. 땅을 쳐다보고 있으려니까. 그랬는데 이제 세월이 지나 그때는 이제 한 1, 2년은 너무 괴롭더라고요. 근데 이제 시간이 지나니까 너무 좋아요.
Unlike traditional burial sites where each deceased is laid in a single tomb, here many, usually up to 100 people, can share a common site. That's why it's also a lot cheaper. It costs about 500,000 won, about $382 to have someone's ashes buried in this shared space. The government is considering changing rules related to the environment to facilitate newer types of natural burials, such as scattering ashes in rivers, sea, and mountains. Experts like Professor Lee Jong-woo of Woolsey University says these burial methods will become more popular with the rising number of single-person households in the country.
관리상의 이제 문제죠. 국토의 문제, 효율성의 문제도 있지만 그런 그 이제 혼자 사는 분, 독거노인 결국에는 이제 또 이제 나이가 들면 그분도 이제 계속 결혼을 안 하고 혼자 산다면은 뭐 사전에 장례식장과 조인을 해서 이제 뭐 나는 이렇게 해서 내가 죽게 되면은 뭐 이렇게 좀 해달라. 그래서 좀 어디 뭐 뿌려달라. 뭐 이제 그렇게 뭐 가는 것도 바람직하다고 생각은 합니다.
어깨를 제껴줘.
Some people as young as these students have indeed started to do just that. Like Won Ye-jin, who decided to take up a major in mortuary science after watching funeral directors work at a grandmother's funeral. She says she doesn't have any specific ideas yet, but she's working on it.
제가 마지막 죽음을 했으면 하는 바람이 있습니다. 그 마지막 죽음을 계속 계획 중이고요. 준비하는 거는 제가 앞으로 지금은 종교가 없지만 나중에 종교가 생길 수도 있고 점점점 바뀌는 제 마음을 계속 기록해두고 주변 사람들한테 설명을 해주면서 그걸 남겨야 된다고 생각합니다.
Such thinking has become so popular that some colleges have created so-called well-dying courses to teach students how to properly handle their own funeral arrangements.
just kind of working around the clock to survive. And then the rent was going up. It was going up another $250, which is not an insane amount, but in long-term effects, it could really be affecting. And as I was already, you're kind of riding on the edge as it is, living alone.
Roman Martinez often works 7 days a week, roasting coffee by day and behind the decks at night. But like many New Yorkers, he's spinning many plates to keep on top of his rent. New York City is one of the world's most expensive places to live. Without anyone else to share expenses, single people are having to make difficult choices to keep their finances on track.
I needed to find something a little bit more stable because our job, through the pandemic, a lot of people left this area. So my coffee shop job wasn't quite so, we didn't know if we were going to make it. And so I brought in a roommate and he took over the second bedroom, and now I rent that out to him. And it's been a helpful boost of getting there, but our rent is continuously going up still.
Roman's situation is not unique. Research shows singles in the USA fork out thousands of extra dollars on rent in what's being called a singles tax. And more Americans are unpartnered, meaning not married nor living with a partner, than ever before. A Pew Research Center study found 38% of people were unpartnered in 2019. That's 10% higher than in 1990.
The singles tax for a renter across the country is $7,000, but in more expensive cities like New York City, that goes up to even $19,500, which is obviously a big chunk of money for a person living on their own. When you're living alone, obviously, you're not splitting the rent with another person, so people end up paying more.
Soaring inflation has had a knock-on effect on rental prices, while record high interest rates mean the market's even tighter than usual.
So if mortgage rates are high, people tend to stay in the rentals market for longer. Right now, the average age of the first-time home buyer is around 37 years old. Before the pandemic, it was around 33 or 34 years old. So people are staying in the rentals market for longer and just putting that additional pressure on the rentals market and causing prices to rise.
Okay, it's a beautiful one bedroom, and I think you're going to be very...
Moving to New York City can open the door for greater career opportunities, but it comes at a cost and with compromises. Broker Alex Abrahamson tells me prospective tenants have to weigh up location, amenities, and the size of living space.
As you can see, we have this amazing view here.
In a bid to add more supply into the market, some office buildings have been repurposed into apartments, like these ones in the financial district. But this brings its own challenges, like ensuring bedrooms have windows and are fire safe. Data from StreetEasy shows the average studio in New York City costs $2,900 per month. In Manhattan, that jumps to almost $3,200, while a Manhattan one-bedroom can set renters back a cool $4,000 every month, meaning many are choosing to live further out instead.
There's been a rise in a lot of the surrounding neighborhoods, or boroughs rather, in terms of housing. We have a lot of stuff going on in Long Island City, Brooklyn, Queens as well, where we're seeing people start to move a little bit outside of the immediate Manhattan area in order to save costs on rent.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, people left the city in droves, easing pressure on the market and forcing prices down to their lowest levels in years. But people are steadily returning, sending rents soaring once again. For more than a century, New Yorkers have been looking for ways to save space, with skyscrapers towering thousands of feet into the air to reduce their footprints. And tenants here are finding innovative ways to cut costs by making the most of what they've got. A niche industry has been building over the past decade or so, helping New York renters partition their homes to add temporary bedrooms.
So a flex wall is basically a structure that we put up in New York City, mainly in New York City, to combat the high cost of rent. They're built from pressure from the floor to ceiling in order to stand up. They're not screwed into the floors, walls, or ceilings, and they're really just a great way to save on rent and turn a one-bedroom into a two-bedroom, or a two-bedroom into a three-bedroom, just take on a roommate or office space.
Creative solutions like these mean singles can saw their monthly outgoings in half, transforming what was once out of reach into a more budget-friendly abode. But experts stress that hidden among the glitzy high-rises are areas of deep deprivation. And researchers say that the chronic shortage of affordable housing is particularly pressing for those living hand to mouth. Professor Sam Shandon says single-parent families are feeling the strain.
Living alone does involve, for the lower moderate income household, some very difficult trade-offs in some cases. And when you're describing use cases, or the single mom or the single parent, having to balance a lot of different things, wanting enough space for you and your family, wanting to be close to a good quality school or nursery, but also wanting to minimize the amount of time spent commuting to work.
Part of the solution, experts say, is building more attainable homes, and quickly.
I think what we see in New York and many other major metropolitan areas around the country is that there's a shortfall in the availability of good quality apartments, particularly in the workforce housing segment. And so part of our solution is in thinking about how it is that we can enhance the supply of apartments. Part of that is going to be relaxing some of the zoning restrictions that allow us to bring higher density housing online, upzoning, so to speak. Part of it is thinking about where can we selectively reposition older office buildings that are no longer viable as office properties for the apartment inventory.
And over the past year, New Yorkers have seen costs pile up across the board, from groceries to bills.
Basically, everyday needs rack up just as much as rent does, so it's a little tough here in that sense. Going anywhere is crazy, so that's also another hard part about being single in the city. If you're dating, and you just one or two drinks, that's $50 out of your pocket, like every time you go on a date, things like that.
Whether they're looking for love or have chosen to be on their own, in the city that never sleeps, singles are paying the price for living alone.